mobile network operators shouldn't become energy companies. Typically, they've been solving their own energy problems, and towercos have been solving their own energy problems. Somehow, what that conversation we're trying to bring together now is let everybody work together. Energy and digitalization are two sides of the same coin.
Good evening and good day. Welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dots. I'm joined by my dear friend, Mrs. Lande, who is a senior energy specialist at GSMA. Lande, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm good. I'm glad it's Friday.
Yep, I'm good to be here.
Awesome. The first time we met was around Missouri.
Yep.
And that was solar home systems funded by the Buhari administration running through NDPHC.
Exactly. You remember well.
What happened with that?
No, that was ruled out, remember? 20,000 solar home systems in 12 northern states. So it was subsidized, but it ruled out.
Now, and I've been thinking about sustainability and about all those words that we now talk about.
So what happened was then obviously they wanted more. So you start with, because when they didn't have access at all, it seemed like, oh, this is hugely transformative, which it was. So then they scaled up. So it's kind of,
Just
just
kept
gone
on
on that,
going.
yeah,
Right.
energy pathway. So then it's one attached to a fan, and then one's with television, like that, like that.
Oh, interesting. So it actually worked.
It actually works. It
Some
actually
would say
works.
that the off-grid space is well behaved compared to the on-grid space.
100%. 100%. There's still some stuff.
Why is that?
I think it's one, the intent it's been a bit more deliberate going into it. So it's very, very focused on the outcomes, whereas the grid probably was more of, well, everybody has a utility, we had independence, and then let's just do this without as much planning and as much need. And there's more data now, there's much more data. So people are still looking at where the gap is and what the need is. So that's why you would come. It's deliberately going into the off-grid space as opposed to just hoping for the best.
But if you run this whole thing back 15 years ago, if you told someone Nigeria will get to a point to either subsidize power or petroleum, they would say would always subsidize petroleum.
Yeah.
But now that's clearly not the case. Power is what's being subsidized, and on the petroleum side, it's a market. So why is that? If you had to take a guess.
I'd say the inefficiencies. They've been trying to not subsidize petroleum for the last, 15 years thereabouts, and citizens would clamor and then they'd go back. So I think it just a natural transition. Plus, there's a lot of global um, conversations around the energy transition and making sure that we go that way. So yes, we are an oil producing nation, but we also have to be realistic about how the costs will be
Mm.
along the
But
value chain.
isn't that the conversations around like Nigerian most human beings want something, they clamor for change, but when push comes to shove, they get used to it and they
Mm,
move on because that's why protests don't last
la-
that long because people just realize I can't change this as much as I can and then they just kind of move on.
Yeah, there is that element, but sometimes also it's just right time, right place.
Mm.
So how did the subsidy end this time? It wasn't a big announcement. Well, let me change that. It was a big
It
announcement.
wasn't.
It was a huge announcement, but we weren't ready for it. Normally we'd have seen the policy notes or the reports or some leak into the press of what was to come in the inaugural speech. Nobody was ready for it. It was literally on the podium, subsidies gone. So I think it needed to, that was it. That was the time and the place.
Yeah, but I think that's the amazing part about that whole speech. Thinking back now, um, a few things could have been done better,
Yep.
but just that shock set of a frenzy of things. But a year, what are we now? 2 years later, the
Mhm.
last year, I can comfortably say there hasn't been any fuel shortages, strikes,
Mm,
or anything like that because we now have a market.
absolutely.
So it's that conversation that I wish we would take on the power sector and just say, you know what? Power in most places grew in this format where you give power to people who can afford it.
Okay.
And then as they get it, they pay the expand. We have
Absolutely.
this idea that everybody should have power, which I'm not sure if you're selling tomatoes, you're not selling tomatoes to everybody, you're selling to people who can afford it. So I think that's the issue we have in the sector with this affordability challenges.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Nobody wants to pay for power. And I think it's the mindset as well. We have typically not been used to paying cost reflective prices and tariffs anyway. And then as a people, we just were used to that unregulated when it was the old NEPA estimated billing. I mean, we've all changed. Now, once the meter came, we've all become more disciplined. And the truth is, if you get what you pay for, most of us will adjust and adapt. And then the very small percentage of people that will need support, that will need subsidy in some way, then there are ways that we can work things out for that band of customers.
Definitely. Awesome. So you've done quite a bit in the energy space from walk around Azuri to RE to some consulting roles and now this energy specialist role. Can
Mhm.
you briefly tell the audience a bit about your background?
Okay, so I always say I'm an accidental renewable energy specialist. I didn't start that way. And as you mentioned, so the Azuri project came along, and that was my first foray into active participation in the renewable energy space, which was solar home systems. So, of course, I mean, and I'd been at NGOs for many years before. So, Azuri was like coming together of everything, energy as well as still being a social enterprise. So it appealed, and that was how I started doing that. Rolled out the project, successful project, and then that led me to RIAN, and of course that opened,
That's
you
right.
know, it opened everything in the renewable energy value chain. So these are the members that were doing 70% of the projects, in the region or definitely in Nigeria. So I think, yeah, so that was that kind of slow and steady
Hmm.
accidental renewable energy journey, which
That's
then took me on to the Nigeria electrification project and on to now GSMA.
interesting. And the Nigerian electrification project, there's so many different parts of that program. What was your portfolio there?
Yeah, so that was the concentration was on solar home systems,
Okay.
standalone solar home systems. So I was leading the component and permit me to brag about the component
Of
because
course,
we
go
did
ahead, shine.
manage to deploy over 1 million solar home systems. I mean,
Wow.
impacting about 5 million Nigerians. So the project was as a whole very successful, but also the component definitely contributed to that.
Interesting. Really cool to hear. So if you take a step back from what you did in Nigeria and what you've done at NAP, you
Hmm,
probably have connected upwards of 1 million plus Nigerians.
absolutely.
Wow. I'm not sure
Absolutely.
most Nigerians can say that. So well done.
Thank you.
So in this new role you have, as a senior energy specialist, GSMA, could you give the audience a background on what GSMA does?
So, GSMA, again, as I say, on my journey, I've always been passionate about the third sector, passionate about NGOs and impact and development. And I've been fortunate that that's really where my career trajectory has taken me. So, GSMA is an association of the clues in the GSM. GSMA is yes, an association of mobile network operators. So it has expanded to affiliated services, but principally it's an association of the operators. So what we do essentially is advocate for the sector, ensure that at the end of the day, it's about the consumer. So yes, it's an association of operators with the operators' interests at heart. But if we can get it right and the enabling environment is right for the operator, who benefits? It's you and I.
Of course.
So that's essentially what we do. So across policy, across taxation, across any advocacy that will enable the operators to be more efficient and to be more effective. Hence my portfolio.
Interesting. And when I think about the comms sector in Africa, there's 600 million phones supposedly in the continent. 200 million are in Nigeria, a country with 50% of people that don't have access to electricity. From a Nigerian context, how is a lack of power slowing down potential growth in this space?
It hugely, hugely. I have to take a deep breath because there's so much associated with that lack of power. So you've given those. So imagine with the unreliable power, still being able to get that connected.
Third of cell phones in Africa.
Absolutely. So just imagine the potential that there still is if we could even reduce the coverage gap that exists and reduce the usage gap. So interestingly, with the stats you've given, so Nigeria now, 4G coverage wise, it's about 84%.
Okay.
When you go into the rural 4G coverage, that goes down to 40 something percent. So you can see that rural urban divide. If we move on to 5G, 5G literally is negligible in rural areas. Peri-urban is about 2%. And then in urban, it's less than 20%.
Okay.
Whereas the world is beginning to talk about 6G.
6G, yeah.
So that energy related drawback and bottleneck is huge, because that's a lot of it is associated with energy. So again, just breaking it down and the discussions, the studies we have with operators, if you can believe it, 40 to 60% of their OPEX, on-site OPEX, is diesel related.
Wow.
So you can begin to imagine. So how do you even make a business case to go into rural areas? And that's typically with more urban coverage. So there's no business case to go into the more rural areas. And with increased costs, you have to pass it on to somebody.
Of course.
And we're just seeing a digital divide that we're hoping will reduce, but we need to really critically look at that energy access in the space.
Yeah, so that's super depressing.
Somewhat.
Because you look at it from a point of view of, because of lack of power, people are not able to be as productive as ours. Just let's not go far. Let's think about our neighbors. You're not able to have 5G coverage. So maybe you're still working at 3G in the urban areas. And you don't have, your systems are not fast. So it takes you time to get things done. But meanwhile, with more power supply, you could quickly get things done. And I think the other bit that's a bit off for me is the diesel piece. The fact that we run so much diesel for some of the towers. I know there's some use cases around some tower owners or trying to get into the space of using renewables as a way to power that infrastructure. What's that journey like, or is that actually happening?
No, it is happening, but it's something that needs to deepen. And I think a lot of it is to do with trust. So maybe I should track back and probably just depress you a little more and tell you that within Nigeria, operators, I mean, this was in the State of Africa Infrastructure Report. Within Nigeria, operators are burning 40 million liters of diesel a month.
40
40
million.
million liters of diesel a month.
Um, so if we dollarize that just to give our audience context.
Context.
So liter of diesel is how much in naira?
It's about 1,600. Let's just use that as
So
an
so a
average.
dollar.
$1.
So
$40
40
million
million
dollars a
dollars
month
a month is spent
on
for
diesel,
on diesel.
which not only could that money be reinvested into infrastructure that would increase coverage, especially in rural areas, but it's not, it's obviously polluting the air.
Mm-hmm.
So just like everybody else, network operators, they have their net zero goals. They are also very conscious of sustainability and decarbonization. So it's two pronged. So not only is it stopping us from reaching the underserved, it's also causing emissions in its own way. I mean, as a secondary part of what they do. So
Yeah, but I also it discourages any sort of rate cuts, rate changes. It'll be the inverse. Things are gonna
exactly.
keep going up because the price of diesel over the last 5 years has gone through the roof.
Absolutely. And where it's volatile, you can't make so many plans. And apart from which, there's associated costs anyway with
Mm-hmm.
diesel. There's going to be the logistics of getting the diesel there. There's security, as we know in our environment, huge, because they need to put personnel typically a lot of the times to make sure that the equipment is safe. And of course, maintenance as well. So I think the associated costs and everything, which is why, we really now need to critically look at renewable energy and really deepen the engagement on having partnerships that can deliver.
Are there current models of RE projects and RE type of engagement that could potentially replace these diesel generators?
There are. Every market is different, and what works in one market might not in the other. But I think first and foremost, the engagements are trying to making sure it's data-driven decisions we're making about this. So using geospatial analysis, making sure that everybody knows where the investment gap is or energy gap or whatever gaps there are. I use the word for to plug any gap there is. So I think that's one of the first things. And what we're seeing is we can't do it in isolation. The mobile network operators shouldn't become energy companies. You understand? They shouldn't become energy companies. So typically they've been solving their own energy problems and towercos have been solving their own energy problems. Somehow, what that conversation we're trying to bring together now is let everybody work together. Energy and digitalization are two sides of the same coin, essentially. What's worked in other places? So if we're looking at, let's say, okay, so mini grid deployment, for instance, and I referred about data. So if you have where mini grid coverage is in an area, potentially with that data, you could layer on tower site data and co-locate. So you are sharing the investment, sharing the risk, and essentially killing two birds with one stone. That's just one of the ways, you know.
Interesting.
And
Good.
And what's also, this has worked in DRC. There is a use case in DRC where the tower co partnered with an energy company and the mobile network operator, and essentially what we call the ABC model. So A is anchor, B is business, and C is community. Anchor being the tower co. So you have your guaranteed revenue because you have your anchor tenant, you have your anchor tenant, essentially customer, and that guarantees you returns. Then you then extend that energy access to the business communities, the business community within small business productive use, essentially. So with productive use, again, generating economic activity. Because what we need to know is it's all about the returns.
Yeah, of course.
That's just the bottom line. It's about the returns. If a mini grid operator deploys within a community and it's not dense and very few off takers, it doesn't make sense for them to go there. But where you have the ABC model, the sweetness of it is you have your anchor tenant, and then you have your anchor customer, and then you have the business, and then the wider community. So that way it's differentiated, and you do have multiple sources of revenue coming back.
Yeah, it's an interesting model, and it's one that I would love to see more of here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm spending a lot of time in the rural communities. It's
Okay.
super frustrating to pick up your phone and see they have one bar.
Absolutely.
And that goes on for hours. Our house in the village, you have to be at a specific spot to get a signal from one of the mobile providers. And it's super frustrating because you like
there's stuff to do.
there's stuff to do.
Yep.
You want to just be able to talk and know that that's done.
Exactly.
And then last I asked, I said, "Oh yeah, there's 3 or 4 towers in the vicinity, but only one is on because of power supply."
Oh, wow.
So you know that power is one of the reasons why these things are not working optimally.
Definitely.
Just what's the payment? How can I ask this? From a payment point of view, who solves that for customers? Are telcos passing off these, I guess, towercos are passing off their OpEx fees to telcos.
Yep.
Telcos are then passing those fees on to customers. Is that kind of how the cycle works?
Yeah, that's it, in a way, yes, that's how it works.
So then most people, I guess, are paying for the $14 million we just mentioned. That's a cost that you and I are paying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when we say, oh, how come, and you notice that the tariff went up recently, there was no way it wouldn't go up because they can't keep absorbing the costs, and we as the customer expect to get the best services.
Yeah.
That's just the bottom line. So if we can plug those gaps, those prices would come down for sure, because there's no other way.
Yeah, but given your role, the Sub-Saharan Africa title, are there other countries that were in this rut, but they found a way to push through that you can think of or reference?
Now I wouldn't say that they were in the same kind of situation. They have had challenges, but the challenges differ across regions. In some areas, without naming specific countries, they have a solid grid. They don't have a weak grid. Their issue might be tariffs and where they lie on the tariff issue. Because in one region, what we found was the tariffs that they were being charged as operators was the same. They didn't quite fit into, they were in some kind of not so sweet spot that wasn't a band that gave them favorable leeway. So they were stuck paying the maximum tariff. So that's what the advocacy was about. In Nigeria, we know that the grid is weak, and that's, our challenge is also off-grid expansion, rural areas and everything. So has anything worked? There are loads of pilots across various models that are working in different areas. I mean, you would have read about the Ethiopia dam, which I'm sure we will, in the next 1 or 2 years, see the impact in the mobile industry, obviously with guaranteed electricity. So, yeah, I mean, baby steps, but
But
we're getting there.
in mature markets, these towers are connected to the grid, right?
Pretty much, yes.
So the lack of access to the grid is really what's driving these innovative models. Oh, interesting.
Absolutely.
But then what about conversations that telcos are having? What took what and kind of phrase this in that
PC way.
Nah, no. So the process to go from an operator owning their entire value chain to
Hmm.
bring in towercos in.
Mm.
What what was behind that process?
Or what's behind it, or why did it
Why did
happen
yeah,
that
why did
happened? I think need.
mm,
Because operators need to focus on their core business.
yeah.
They need to focus on their core business. So obviously, I mean, in my role, energy is huge, and all the technicalities of spectrum and all the radio access network and all the rest of those wonderful mobile technology words. I don't deal with that on a day-to-day basis, but they've got different things that they've got to think about. They want to move from 4G to 5G to 6G. There's satellite, there's direct to device, there's so many things that they need to look at. They don't want energy as a headache.
Yeah.
Nah, they don't. It's just too much logistics around it. And especially in this environment, any engagement we've had, security has always been a big concern. And
Really?
oh, it's huge. It's huge. We hear of towercos suffering, average of 7, 8 vandalisms a week,
Oh wow.
and sometimes to primary infrastructure. So I think that is also a very big part,
Mm.
that we don't link to that lack of a stable grid.
So it's almost like get if you get rid of the diesel challenges and get rid of the security challenges, our rates in country, wonder if we got rid of them, our
Oh, okay.
rates would go down, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As in the
Yeah,
so
because
100%. Because this is what I was saying, that if you're burning $40 million a month, that's good funding that could go into infrastructure. So if it was, grid expansion in an environment where the grid is solid enough and you're just looking at expanding it, but we know, and you've been in the space long enough to know that grid extension is not necessarily our reality in this environment. So I think, that's the main thing. That those funds could be better utilized
somewhere else.
somewhere else, and it would drive costs down. It absolutely would.
Yeah. No, so there's all this conversation in Nigeria like that the regulators are the folks that sets the market up for success.
Yeah.
On the two sectors in Nigeria that we can most of the time say are in an advanced or an acceptable phase will be banking and the telecom
Telco.
space.
Yeah.
And those two spaces are where a regulator has shown up and created an enabling environment for the sector to run, and
100%.
has done so, and also has been very strict on if you break the law, we will beat you over the head,
Absolutely.
which I think has forced people to behave.
Exactly.
So it's an interesting approach that I wish we did more on the grid side, but a totally different conversation.
Absolutely.
But I think are there other policies or recommendations you would make
Hmm.
to help some of the other shortcomings of them in regulating the space?
I think, which is what I typically end most of my presentations with, is collabo, collabo, collabo. So, as you observe, the regulator has done well in the space, but we now need to go. It shouldn't be, I mean, before this, it had been regulator for energy, regulator for digital space. Now we need to start looking at it as co-regulator,
Okay.
co-policy developer. So potentially looking at areas, working on the synergies and looking at areas like should there be incentives for green infrastructure?
Okay.
Should we subsidize energy for digital? Those are, and should the big DFIs be looking at it as one conversation as opposed to, let's sort out the energy access or let's sort out the digital access? I think we can do both. And I think with all the parties working together, I think we would achieve it faster because we would literally, you'd run 2 steps in digital, you're running two with energy.
Hmm.
10 steps with digital, 10 steps with energy. And I think that's where the success will be.
Who will coordinate those efforts?
That's a good question. That's a good question. But we like task force in Nigeria and committee and no, but jokes aside, it has to be a multi-sectoral entity. How that will work, I mean, this point, do I, Lande, know exactly? No, but we've worked across sectors before and we can do the same again. It's just agreeing, on the process flow. First of all, is even agreeing that we want to work together. That's a big step, to be honest, because you know how the environment can be. It's not everybody that wants to collaborate. There's always, different interests. So just the fact that it's okay, right? We've got to this stage. It's 2025. How do we solve these problems? The only way to go is to work together. Let's not do it in silos. Let's take up this cause. And that multi-sectoral approach, we can't see us failing, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree that you need different stakeholders. It has to be cross-functional, not just even
Absolutely.
sectoral as well. Um, Mobile payments, mobile money
Mm.
completely has changed the game in Nigeria and Africa. And but it requires outcomes, right?
Yeah.
There's been so many times you've been at a point of sale and you cannot make a transfer, or
Exactly.
the POS machine is not working.
Yep.
For the average Nigerian, that's super frustrating. Are there things around that we're hoping telcos are trying to do to reinforce and to change or to improve their networks?
All the time. It's constant. It's constant. And that even regulatory wise, they have their quality of service benchmarks that they mustn't dip below. So downtimes, et cetera, et cetera. So how that works. But again, it's a little bit tied to the infrastructure. So if you've got X thousand liters of diesel deployed to somewhere with just a thin perimeter fence, somebody scales it, grabs your gasket of your generator, there is nothing you can do. But they are always working towards that. As I said, they are regulated in that regard. You can't, there's certain benchmarks that they have to adhere to, and it's, global best practice. So it's a headache. I think it's something that it's an ongoing effort. It can never stop because the customer is everything to them.
Of course.
And we've all seen mobile has transformed our lives. E-commerce, smartphone adaptation. I mean, our phones are our offices now. Literally,
Yeah.
you can do everything on your phone. Anybody can, it literally is an office.
Yeah.
So you'll check your email, you'll send stuff, you'll buy, you can open your e-shop, everything can be done on the phone. Social media,
Yeah.
watching. So really, it can only get better. That's the good part. It can only get better. The not so interesting part is we all have to work hard to make sure it gets there. And everybody has a role. It's not just government, it's you and I. It's you and I, it's public sector, it's private sector, it's individuals, it's everybody. If
Yeah.
we really want that digital transformation for Africa.
And but I think when I look at the mobile space and I see the opportunities there, I'm also quite worried that a number of these things are going to miss us if we're not careful because there's so many different technology advances happening. And someone might say, I want to set up in Nigeria because access to markets and X, Y, and Z, but you don't have the infrastructure in place to do that. So for me, that's the biggest worry.
It is. I mean, which is why all the work must go in now to make sure that all the opportunities we can actually harness them. Because it is disturbing, when we talk about smartphones as well, smartphone adoption has increased. Yes, but adoption has increased. However, in rural areas, you will find that because of the lack of infrastructure, the uptake is not the same.
Where it should be, yeah.
You can't compare education, e-education in urban areas to rural areas, telemedicine, and all manner of stuff. I mean, you'd have heard about robotics for performing operations now. So for rural areas, we are a little bit far in terms of technology, but really and truly, I mean, to just not not be depressed about it. There's a lot of work that needs to go into ensuring that we do build the infrastructure. And I think, it's working in many ways. It seems like it's slow, but it's those little, to use the cliche, those little drops of water, essentially. So everybody chipping in.
Makes it work.
Yeah.
So then I think when I think through where we are as a country, and your role is obviously more broader than Nigeria. Most of Sub-Saharan Africa is on the equator. Solar should be the primary option to power these units because of where we are.
Exactly.
But it seems like that process hasn't been as easy to kind of replace or swap the diesel generators with solar. Is that an accurate statement?
It is fairly accurate, but I think it's also to do with costs, mindset, orientation, because it was just
You just mentioned
easier.
$40 million. What's going on?
No, but that's Nigeria. In terms of the sub-region, where the grid is marginally okay, it wasn't urgent, it wasn't urgent. But now, apart from anything else, as I said, operators have their net zero goals as well. So they are also trying to transition existing infrastructure. And we know that the cost of solar panels has gone down significantly in the last decade. So these are all things that are factors that are helping to increase adoption of it. And as other things, as infrastructure gets older, it will be replaced by greener infrastructure because there is sun in Sub-Saharan Africa.
A lot of it.
It's a no-brainer. There's a lot of sun waiting to be harnessed. Waiting to be harnessed.
I'll get you out on this question. Does GSMA have a goal as far as what number are you looking to have green energy in Nigeria or the sub-region?
There are group operator targets.
Oh, okay, really?
Yeah, there are group operator targets. So that then trickles down at the country levels and but they have those well publicized, and most of them you'll find now have sustainability arms.
Okay.
And quite well staffed and very focused. They have reporting guidelines as well. So there's scope 1 emissions, scope 2 emissions, scope 3. They have to report it on the international stage. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. 100%.
After this podcast, I'm not as depressed.
Good.
But I am hopeful that given the fact that when people show up to a market, cost and affordability become if something is going to cost you more money, you're going to figure out how to not spend your money on it.
Exactly.
But I'm hopeful that with the adoption of renewable energy, the prices will come down and people will be able to afford because, like you said, this revolution is missing the rural communities, and Nigeria, I believe, is 60% rural.
Yeah.
So that's more than half the country will be left behind.
Absolutely, which we don't want.
Which we can't have.
Which we can't have. I mean, apart from anything else, it's, as I said, those little drops of water. So where you can invest in other things when you're not concentrating on diesel or other infrastructure, then they can pass on. There's, handsets that they can make, specially inbuilt, cheaper for rural customers. But you can't do that when you're still trying to balance your books, given the high OPEX. So there are ways, essentially, if we can solve this, those funds can be diverted to more useful means. But yeah,
Awesome.
so there is definitely hope, and a lot of work is going on to make sure that Africa is digitally included 100%.
Thank you so much, Lande.
100%.
This has been quite insightful. And also, I think it's something from anyone looking to get into the space. Opportunities are there. Awesome. Thank you, Lande.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. This podcast is brought to you by Next Year Capital, committed to driving conversations that shape Africa's energy future. Please subscribe, share, and stay tuned. Until next time, I am Emeka Okpukpara Jr., and this has been Connecting the Dots.